30 years ago today, the future of Waco and of law enforcement in this country changed forever. A 51-day standoff between the feds and the Branch Davidian religious group came to a fiery and deadly end. We've all heard about the botched initial raid and then the negotiations between the FBI and Davidian leader David Koresh. Perhaps no one had better insight into all of it, though, than Dick Degarian, his attorney, the notorious Texas defense attorney, representing Koresh, thinking eventually there would be a murder trial. He told me about the first time he got to meet him in person, face to face.
First, they took me up to about 100 yards away from the front door in the back of a Bradley and said, we have to let you out here. Boots kept crunching on expended rounds. There were hundreds, literally hundreds of expended 9mm 45 caliber and 222, 223 rounds all over the front of the place. And those were all rounds that had been fired by the ATF.
Now we'll hear much more from Dick and his perspective on what went wrong tonight at 6:30. Now I want to bring in 25 News anchor Lauren Adams. She is live from the ATF Memorial in downtown Waco. Lauren, you're tracking the massive law enforcement response during all of this.
That's right, Todd. And you mentioned we are here at the ATF Memorial, which was built to honor the ATF agents who fell during that siege and additional officers in Waco who have fallen. Today, several people have been coming by just looking at the names, remembering that day 30 years ago. As you mentioned, the law enforcement response that day was huge, from federal agents to local law enforcement officers. I had the chance to sit down with former McLennan County Sheriff Larry Lynch, who was a lieutenant with the Sheriff's Department 30 years ago. He actually started the negotiations over the telephone with David Koresh inside the compound. He was on the phone for 36 hours straight with no sleep. I also had the chance to talk with current Sheriff Parnell McNamara, who was a U.S. Marshal back then. He told me he wishes things had turned out differently that day, but they have learned a lot about law enforcement since then. Both men have had to live with what happened all these years.
I know where I was. I know what I did, and that's the best that I could do.
There were a lot of errors, but come back to Koresh, he instigated it and he caused it.
Now, the Taylor Museum of Waco History is trying to keep the memory alive of that deadly confrontation. Reporter Nakia Simon spoke with a survivor and a professor who are keeping those memories alive.
This is in the main area. He's taking the roof off of it.
April 19, 1993, FBI agents penetrated the Mount Carmel compound,
And the safety of the children,
resulting in several fires breaking out that engulfed the property in flames, killing 76 Branch Davidians, 5 of which was the husband and children of former Branch Davidian Sheila Martin.
They thought they went into that building, that little house, to be saved, and they thought that would protect them from the flames.
Sheila left the compound during the 51-day standoff 30 years ago to share her truth about the religious community.
So David said, I need somebody to be outside to know that they're not to be afraid of what the people are seeing every day on the TV, that God is in control.
She has now joined the mission of sharing her story with the world on what could have been prevented to save the lives of those that are now lost.
All of these sources are stressing that the FBI negotiators were doing their best to negotiate people out, more children out, more adults out.
And
it was working. The negotiations were working, but then the commanders who ordered the hostage rescue team operators to take those aggressive actions, those were just ongoing mistakes because it discouraged the Branch Davidians from coming out. So it's important to understand that this was a complex and interactive event.
With only artifacts left of the place she once called home.
Closer to the day, you are definitely very more aware of what you went through, what they've gone through, and the horror of what happened here in Waco.
That was Nakia Simon reporting. Now we're going to head things over to Andrew Lamparski, who is at the Branch Davidian Memorial, where they held a ceremony earlier today to remember those lives that were lost 30 years ago. Andrew?
was 30 years ago on this exact site where 76 Branch Davidians lost their lives in that fiery ending to the 51-day standoff. Their names marked permanently behind me here at this memorial. And earlier today, survivors read off each individual name of each life lost. That happened earlier this morning at the Taylor Museum of History here in Waco. Former Davidians gathering to remember the lives lost. We heard from about 7 of them, many of who are very critical of the government's actions in 1993, while adding David Koresh was, quote, no saint. One of the people sharing their story today was Heather Jones. She was a 9-year-old when she left the compound during negotiations, leaving behind several family members, including her own father.
It doesn't get easier. And I wish it did. There really is no words for what happened.
3 decades later, I can tell you the pain and the anger is still palpable from survivors and former Branch Davidians. Coming up at 6, you'll hear from more of them to hear what former followers of David Koresh are saying 30 years later.
All right, thanks, Andrew. An emotional interview there. We're going to have more from this ATF memorial coming up tonight at 6, but for now we're going to send things back to the studio with Todd Unger, who spoke with one of the former wives of David Koresh. Todd?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lauren. We are here with Dana Kiabu, who was married to Koresh for about 5 years. We want to thank you so much for giving us a few minutes tonight. As you're here in town looking back on this 30-year mark, what is the first thing that really comes to your mind?
A generation has passed. And it's been a long time, and I can't be this old.
Because when you were with the Davidians, you were a much younger woman.
I was in my 20s.
Talk to me a little bit about how you got in with the group and then your relationship with David.
I'm from Hawaii, and there was a group from Hawaii that we were all part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church there, and we were a social group within the church, you know, and we spent weekends together, and
sure.
You know, we were friends and did all the things friends do. And then one of our friends is Mark Bro, who now lives in Australia. He met up with Perry Jones in a grocery store near Loma Linda.
Okay.
He and Steve Schneider were very good friends. And through that connection, Vernon, he was Vernon back then, came to Hawaii and began to share his message with us there, which caused a big controversy in the church. And for me, you know, number one, it has to do with, hey, these are my friends that we're talking to. And when I asked people in the church, well, what's he saying? What's so bad about it? I don't know, but it's wrong. And I went, but how do you know what he's saying? So I went to listen. And he preached straight from the Bible, chapter, not just a verse at a time, and let's apply it to this in our lives. It was, let's read what Isaiah had to say, and let's start over here, and this is what's going to happen. And the idea of prophecy is not new to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So to hear that someone had a message from God, I could listen. And the reaction from other people was like, and I was young and idealistic as well. So I went to listen, and it was nothing like I'd ever heard before.
By the time of the 51-day siege, or standoff rather, you had already left.
Yes.
When you watched this all unfold from afar with your children, were you surprised?
I don't know that I was shocked. I wasn't expecting anything like this to happen. I'm going to sound really weird, but so quickly. I thought things were a little bit further in the future. I thought things would happen in Israel. Because we were planning to go to Israel. I had bought a passport, and not bought, gotten a passport. And we were preparing to go to the land where everything would take place. So this was different. But I could see how they could be interpreted because America was the Assyrian in all these scriptures. And so the Assyrians acting up and coming to attack them. I wasn't thinking about the scripture when I first saw it. I just looked at it and went, you can imagine, oh, insert word there. And I didn't know what to think.
But you knew a lot of these women and children inside.
Yes. I'd heard people had been wounded. I'd heard David had been wounded, that he'd left a recording on his mother's voice machine, answering machine. And I watched with everybody else because I didn't know. I just didn't know.
Final question. If someone is at home tonight watching this interview, what is the one thought you want them to leave with?
There are two sides or more to every story. The truth is the truth, but you need to dig. You do the research. Talk to the people. Don't just take whatever you see out there as gospel. Find out. If you really want to know, ask.
Dana, thank you so much for giving us a few minutes tonight. We really appreciate it.